Hello, everyone, and welcome to June 9th, the Wednesday of the 10th week in Ordinary Time of our liturgical calendar. As I was praying with the scripture passages from today's reading, I was struck by the following line in the first reading from the second book of Corinthians. It says this: "Our qualification comes from God, who has indeed qualified us as ministers of a new covenant." As ministers of a new covenant. And it was the word covenant that really kind of made an impact on me. The word kept coming back to me over and over again. And so I stayed with that and reflected on how and why that word was important for me today. So I looked up the definition of a covenant, and one definition said this: a binding promise of far-reaching importance in the relationship between individuals, groups, or nations. It includes social, legal, religious, and other elements. Now, throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament, we hear about covenants that God makes with the Israelites, and that Jesus himself becomes the new covenant to the people that he interacts with and as his mission moves forward. But I think the reason why that word covenant struck me in such a particular way was because of an experience I had this weekend. I've shared during these videos that my mom lives in an assisted living, and it's hard to believe that we sold our family home about 3 years ago now. And at that time, one of my brothers agreed to take a bunch of the boxes and store them in his house. And over Memorial Weekend, when we were all together, he's like, "So what about these boxes?" So we went through them, and I took some back to go through here in New Jersey. And one of the boxes contained all the mass cards and notes that we received at the time of my dad's death. And this is almost 30 years ago. And my mom kept all these notes all these years. And I thought, before I'm going to get rid of these, I want to go through them because I think I would appreciate them more now than I was able to at the time. And so I spent Saturday, a good portion of Saturday, sitting outside and had a good cry as I read through these really beautiful notes. And it was just something to read all these names of people who I hadn't thought about in such a long time, and the names of people who passed through my life and the life of my family, and just so touched by the kindness that they showed to us at such a difficult moment in our lives. So what does that all have to do with covenant? Well, I think it's because one of the main themes that I kept reading about in these notes was this idea of how touched people were by my mom's faithfulness in caring for my dad during those 2 years. And we cared for him in our home. And it wasn't easy, as any of you who have done caregiving can attest, that it was hard. And I think in those 2 years, she was overnight someplace else only twice. Once was from one of my brother's graduation, and another was for our brother's wedding. But every other night she was there with him. And so it made me think about how my mom and dad made a covenant to one another, the promise that they made to be there in sickness and in health. And in living out that promise, my mom made such a lasting impact on our family, on anybody who knew them. And I think about that definition that I read earlier, a binding promise. And some in life make a very specific promise to others in marriage, or the vows of a priest or a sister when they make that promise to God. Some covenants that we make are not maybe spoken out so intentionally, but they've certainly understood the promise that a parent makes to care for a child. And now as an adult, the promise that I've made to try to care for my mom in her elder years. In light of all that's happened during this time of the pandemic, it has me thinking about the covenants that I have in my life right now, of all different kinds, that I need to reflect on and recommit to and to strengthen. And during this time, I've heard so many people talk about how the time of the pandemic has helped prioritize things in life. What is most important? The people who matter most to us. So when we think about our spouses or our children, our grandchildren, our siblings, our friends, other loved ones that we share a special bond, in what ways are we being called to deepen and strengthen those covenants with one another? Maybe it's a good time to really give thanks for those connections, those bonds that we have, and recommit to them in a new way. But the relationship or the covenant that struck me most in reading those cards were the cards from all the parishioners of our parish. That was St. Anthony's in Dunmore, Pennsylvania, where I grew up. The food and the flowers, the mass intentions, the cards were just overflowing. And I cried about what that parish relationship has meant to me and my family, and how it has formed me in so many lasting ways, probably without my even knowing it. And I think about how they all rallied to us. And it's like this unspoken covenant when you're in a parish, that it's a relationship based in our faith, that we walk with one another in great joy and also in times of sorrow. So it got me thinking about our parish and the commitment we make to one another. What does that mean? What does that look like? Is that sense of parish connection something that's of a bygone era, or is it something that's still alive now? And I guess that's what I'm reflecting on. I was in my home parish until I was age 24. And from age 24 until I came here to New Jersey, to St. Charles at age 42, I was in a bunch of different faith communities. So being here at St. Charles is the longest I've been in a parish family since my childhood parish. And it just has me reflecting, and would like to invite you to reflect on that too in these days ahead. Like, what does it mean to be in a covenant with one another as members of a parish community? And especially now, as we're coming out of this time of the pandemic, where more and more people are coming back, that things are opening up more, and certainly by the fall, things will feel somewhat more normal. How will we recommit to one another in the parish? And it's such a unique relationship, because the relationship is one at its core is based on our love of Jesus, right? The love of faith, our hope in God, our hope to be people of justice. It's a very unique relationship, a very unique bond that parishioners have with one another. And I think that it's a relationship, a connection that could be really important in our world today. So I invite us to let's keep praying about that together. How and in what ways will I make a covenant with my parish community? How will I make a covenant with my parish community? What will that look like? What am I willing to offer? What do I hope to receive? And how can we build an even stronger community together than what we had before the pandemic began? How can we build that together? So I just offer that for our reflection in the days ahead, the months ahead. What does it mean to be committed to a covenant, a bond with one another as a parish. So blessings to you and to all your loved ones, and always keeping you in my prayers. And until we see each other again, I wish you much peace and much hope.